They call it the most tragic love story in the history of Portugal. It was not born in poetry, yet poetry made it eternal. It was no invented legend, but truth written in blood and tears. In the heart of the 14th century, in a kingdom still in the making, a prince and a lady crossed paths. Pedro, the prince and heir. Inês de Castro, the Castilian lady who stole his heart. A love that bloomed in the shadow of power and would be condemned by the crown, by the sword, and by reason of state. But death did not silence it. From pain was born a myth, and from tragedy rose an eternal symbol of a love that defied kings, that defied death itself. And that still endures, etched into the silent stone of Alcobaça. She was born in Galicia around the year 1320, a child of one of Castile's noble families. She entered Portugal in 1340 as lady-in-waiting to Constanza Manuel, the Castilian princess chosen to be the wife of Prince Pedro. It was at court that their destinies crossed. The prince, heir to King Afonso IV, was already married to Constanza. Within her he found more than beauty, a presence that set his soul aflame. Chroniclers speak of lingering glances, of restrained gestures, that soon turned into passion. Love was born in secret, hidden in the shadows of palace corridors, in letters concealed in furtive meetings, and soon it grew too strong to be denied. But what for them was passion, for the kingdom was danger. Inés's kin, the powerful Castro family of Castile, threatened the delicate alliances between the two realms. At court, their love was whispered as scandal. It was seen as a menace to the balance of the crown. When Constanza died in 1345, the prince found himself a widower. Freed from marriage, he no longer hid his bond with Inés. Out of their love, 4 children were born, and their life together began to take the shape of a true marriage. But the heart of the prince was not his alone. It also belonged to the kingdom. And for King Afonso IV, this love had become a threat. The influence of her brothers allied with the great houses of Castile. It was feared that Portugal would be swept into Castile's civil wars. The king feared for the throne's independence, for the safety of the dynasty, for the fragile balance of the borders. So the king acted. He drove Inés from court, believing space would end their love. But letters still crossed the shadows between them, words of love that no decree could silence. Some chronicles say she was first exiled to the castle of Albuquerque on the Castilian frontier, but soon after she was sent to Coimbra, to the convent of Santa Clara Velha. But the prince continued to visit her in secret. She became known by a name whispered in court, Heron's Neck, a symbol of her beauty and the envy it stirred. Whispers spread among the people. Advisors pressed the king with urgency. And despite everything, their love grew, unshaken and unbreakable, defying more and more the cold logic of the state. The year was 1355. Pressure on the king had become unbearable. Advisors and nobles insisted. It was said that as long as Inés remained alive, the realm was at risk. King Afonso IV, torn between love for his son and duty to the crown, gave in. He gave the order, and the sentence was death. In January of that year, at Coimbra, 3 men were chosen. It was they who carried out the king's command. Their memory still alive in history. Some chronicles place the scene at the Alcazova, the estate of tears. They tell that she fell to her knees and begged for mercy. But the blade fell. Legend tells of a fountain born from her tears, and of stones forever marked red by her blood. And her blood marked forever the memory of Portugal. The prince was far from Coimbra that day. When news reached him, grief and fury consumed his heart. He had lost the woman he had chosen, the mother of his children, the great love of his life, and he swore vengeance. This was not only the death of a woman. It was the breaking of father and son, the clash of passion and reason of state. The fate of Inês had become the fate of a kingdom. Her death left a scar, one that time could never close. The prince rose against his father, and civil war loomed. But Queen Beatrice intervened, and a fragile peace was restored. The year was 1357, when King Afonso IV drew his last breath, and the prince ascended the throne as King Pedro of Portugal. The new king did not forget. At the start of his reign, he ordered that the killers of Inês be brought to justice. 2 of them were captured and executed with cruel severity, their hearts torn from their chests, as if to mirror the pain they had caused his own. The 3rd found refuge in exile. He lived out his final years far from Portugal. From this vengeance, the king earned his grim epithet, the Justicer. Yet vengeance was not enough. As king, Dom Pedro revealed his secret. Before death claimed her, Inês had been his true wife. And to prove his eternal devotion, he raised her to the dignity of queen, even after the grave. In 1360, 5 years after her death, she began her final journey to the monastery of Alcobaça, chosen by Dom Pedro. There, in the great Cistercian abbey, 2 majestic tombs were carved. They were placed face to face, so that on the day of judgment, they might rise and look upon each other once more. The ceremony was solemn, filled with silence and awe. Chroniclers wrote of her coronation as queen, even in death, and legend went further. They say the lords of Portugal were made to bow before her and kiss the cold hand of the dead queen. Between history and myth, out of legend and grief, arose the greatest love story of Portugal. The tombs at Alcobaça, eternal in stone and rich in carved detail, remain as witness to a passion that defied time itself. Pedro himself would die in 1367. By his will, he rests forever with his beloved. And there they remain, face to face, in eternal vigil. Centuries have passed. Kings and empires have fallen. Yet their story continues to be told, as if time itself could not silence it. It was not only a passion, it turned into a tragedy of politics and power, a wound in the heart of a kingdom, but also a symbol of love, the greatest this land would ever remember. In the stones of Alcobaça lies more than carved marble. There rests the proof that neither crown nor sword nor death could tear 2 souls apart. Dom Pedro and Inês are not bound to the 14th century. They belong to the memory of a people, to the verses of poets, to the imagination of a nation. Centuries later, poets gave voice to their story. In the timeless lines of the Lusíads, Camões raised their love above battles themselves, proof that memory can turn pain into eternal verse. And so, between history and legend, between blood and eternity, there is one truth that survives. There are loves that cannot be measured by time, for they were born to live in eternity.